They never expected you to see it. That is what unsettles them the most. Not that you escaped the trap, but that you understood it long before they realized you did. There is a strange kind of silence that falls over a room when someone who was meant to be ruined walks out untouched, calm and wiser than before. It is the silence you are hearing now, the one filled with their disbelief, their frustration, their quiet fury, because they thought they had you cornered. They thought they had calculated every step you might take. But they forgot one thing. A person who walks with truth learns to see shadows differently. Their anger comes from confusion. How did you see what was hidden? How did you read intentions that were wrapped in smiles? They cannot comprehend that pain sharpens perception, that betrayal trains the heart to listen more closely, that disappointment teaches the soul to observe with a gentler, quieter clarity. They planned something complicated, thinking you would stumble. Yet you moved through it with the ease of someone who has already survived storms much darker than their schemes. There is something unsettling about a person who refuses to be broken by the very traps designed to destroy them. It exposes the smallness of those who built the trap in the first place. They wanted you tangled, confused, begging for direction. Instead, you stood still, saw the cracks in their intentions, and stepped aside before the net could fall. It was not luck. It was growth. The kind of growth that frightens people who rely on manipulation to feel powerful. They are furious because you did not react, you did not panic, you did not give them the satisfaction of watching you struggle inside their design. You simply recognized the game and chose not to play. There is a certain dignity in quiet wisdom that infuriates those who thrive on chaos. They expected noise, but you gave them silence. They expected confusion, but you responded with clarity. They expected you trapped, but you became untouchable. What they built for your downfall became the proof of your maturity. They wanted to test your weakness. Instead, they revealed your strength. The moment they realized you were thinking 3 steps ahead was the moment their confidence began to deteriorate. Because it is one thing to oppose someone naive. It is another to oppose someone awakened. They do not admit their failure openly, but you can feel it in the shift of their behavior. The way their words tremble behind forced calmness, the way their smiles lose their shine, the way their presence feels unsettled when you enter the room. They are carrying the weight of a plan that backfired, and nothing frustrates a schemer more than discovering that the person they underestimated was quietly studying every detail. Your wisdom became your shield, your patience became your weapon, and that combination is something they never accounted for. They are not simply angry that you outsmarted their trap, they are frightened by how easily you did it. Because now they know you see more than you say, understand more than you reveal, and discern more than you react to. You carry a kind of inner knowing that cannot be bought, copied, or defeated. They wanted control over your direction, but you took control of your awareness. And awareness is something no trap can contain. It slips through every snare, rises above every scheme, and turns every plot into a lesson. That is why they are furious, not because you escaped, but because you evolved, and evolution is the one thing they cannot sabotage. They never imagined that you would see through them so effortlessly. People who build traps always assume their intelligence is superior, that their strategy is too sophisticated to be noticed by the one they deem naive. They underestimate the quiet observers, the ones who speak little but feel deeply, the ones who don't rush to expose what they already know, and that is precisely where their downfall begins. You were watching long before they believed you were aware. You were piecing together their intentions while they assumed you were blind. You saw the cracks in their kindness, the shifts in their tone, the inconsistencies in their stories. They thought they were hiding their motives behind casual smiles, but you recognized the uneasiness behind their eyes. You understood their game before they even placed the first piece on the board. What infuriates them is not that you escaped the trap, it is that you saw it being constructed in real time. They cannot comprehend how you detected the subtle signs. Those signs they thought were invisible. But there is something profound that happens when a person has been hurt enough times. Their vision becomes clearer, not darker. You do not become cynical, you become discerning. Your heart doesn't close, it simply grows wiser. You didn't outsmart them by accident. You outsmarted them because life has trained you to read the world with a deeper kind of awareness. You saw the way their questions probed too deeply into areas that never concerned them before. You noticed how their compliments became overly sweet, how their interest arrived suddenly and without reason, how their friendliness appeared only when they needed something. You watched how they positioned themselves, how they tried to gather information, how they wanted to guide your choices while pretending they were helping. Every move they made only confirmed what you already sensed. Something wasn't right. You didn't accuse them. You didn't confront them. You simply observed. With the calmness of someone who has learned that the truth eventually reveals itself without your interference. And as you observed, the picture became clearer. Their intentions had a structure, a rhythm, a scent that your spirit recognized instantly. People forget that the soul has its own way of discerning danger. It doesn't speak loudly, but it whispers at the perfect moment. It nudges you gently, saying, "Be careful. This smile is not what it appears. These words are not carrying honesty. This kindness is not clean." When you listened to that inner voice, you stepped into a higher level of awareness. You didn't shout about what you knew. You didn't expose them. You didn't need to. Sometimes silence is the sharpest shield you can carry. They believed your silence meant ignorance. They misread your calmness as confusion. They mistook your patience for weakness. They thought they were guiding the situation, unaware that you had already stepped out of the trap before they finished building it. And when the moment came, when they thought their plan was ready to spring, you were already far beyond its reach. That is the moment that stunned them. Start in the sponge labeled Mother Magic Sun, Sun Love and Hearth. Such strength has never found them. They expected you to fall right into their design. Instead, you walked around it, as if it were nothing more than a shallow puddle after rain. Their fury comes from realizing that their intelligence was not superior. Their confidence was misplaced. They now carry the uncomfortable truth that you were never the one being misled. They were. You let them believe in their own illusion, not out of spite, but because you understood there was no need to fight what would eventually collapse under its own weight. You let them reveal themselves fully, so that there would be no doubt left in your mind. And when you finally stepped away, you did it without drama, without noise, without giving them the reaction they secretly craved. Now they struggle to understand how you saw what they thought was hidden so deeply. They replay every moment, every conversation, every gesture, trying to pinpoint the moment they slipped. But they never slipped. The truth is simpler and far more unsettling to them. You saw them from the beginning. You saw the flicker of dishonesty at the very first moment they attempted to disguise their intentions. You saw the shape of their plan before it had form. You saw the shadow behind the light they pretended to offer. That realization terrifies them more than the failure of their plan, because to outsmart a trap is one thing, but to see it before it becomes a trap at all, that is a kind of wisdom they cannot grasp, and that is why they are furious. Not because you escaped, but because you understood. You saw everything long before they believed you could. They do not understand how your eyes became so sharp, how your intuition grew so precise, how you learned to read the unspoken intentions hidden inside people's actions. But your clarity did not appear out of nowhere. It was born from seasons of pain you never wanted, experiences you never asked for, and lessons you had to learn the hard way. Your past did not break you, it refined you. Every heartbreak carved depth into your perception. Every betrayal added accuracy to your discernment. Every disappointment strengthened your ability to recognize patterns long before they repeat. Pain became your quiet teacher, shaping your understanding in ways those who never face their own shadows cannot comprehend. You learned early that intentions often wear disguises. People who smile may carry thicker knives than those who scowl. People who promise loyalty may crumble the moment loyalty becomes inconvenient. People who say they care may only care as long as caring gives them an advantage. These realizations did not make you bitter, they made you awake. You stopped accepting words as truth. You started observing behavior. You started trusting the consistency of actions rather than the softness of voices. You began to pay attention not to what people said, but to the small ways they revealed themselves when they thought no one was watching. Your past pain sharpened your vision the way a storm forces the eyes to stay open. You saw how disappointment can make a person collapse or transform. You chose transformation. You chose to rise beyond the wounds instead of becoming defined by them. In rising, you gained a sensitivity that those who have lived sheltered lives cannot imagine. You began to feel the slightest tremor in someone's intentions. You noticed when someone's excitement around you was too sudden, too forced, too rehearsed. You sensed when someone's kindness came with a weight attached, a hook hidden underneath the praise. You recognized when someone's interest had more calculation than sincerity. This awareness became your quiet armor. They wanted to trap you because they assumed you were the same person you once were. Trusting, open, unaware of the subtle shadows behind people's smiles. They did not realize that the very wounds others had inflicted in the past had trained you for this moment. You learned to read the world not with suspicion, but with understanding. You understood that human intentions can shift like the wind, soft one moment, violent the next. You learned that trust is a bridge built slowly, not a doorway flung open to anyone who knocks. And you learned that the soul whispers warnings long before danger becomes visible. When they tried to trick you, they expected you to step into the trap blindly, as you might have years ago. But you are no longer that person. Time has sculpted you into someone who pauses, observes, and listens to that inner voice that has never once lied to you. It was not fear that made you careful, it was wisdom. It was not mistrust that made you watchful, it was experience. It was not paranoia that made you step aside. It was clarity earned through hardship. Pain sharpened your instincts the way a blade is sharpened on stone. You learned to sense shifts in tone that others ignore. You learned to recognize patterns in behavior that others dismiss. You learned to read the silence between words, the hesitation behind agreements, the faint tension in forced kindness. While they believed they were playing a clever game, you had already recognized the opening moves. You saw the contradictions. You noticed their urgency. You sensed their excitement at the thought of your downfall. It was familiar, too familiar. It echoed past experiences, the ones that once brought you to your knees, the ones that taught you where to place your trust and where to withdraw it. Your pain became the very reason you outsmarted them, not because it made you cold, but because it made you perceptive. You stopped seeing people for who they pretended to be and started seeing them for who they truly were. You stopped falling for sweet words and started observing consistent actions. You stopped reacting emotionally and started assessing spiritually. This level of awareness terrifies those who rely on deception. They do not understand how you sensed their intentions so quickly. They do not know that your soul has learned to identify danger long before your eyes do. They cannot comprehend that what they thought was a clever disguise was to you a transparent mask. They resent that the very pain they believed would make you vulnerable instead made you powerful. Your past suffering gave you a kind of quiet intelligence, one that sees beyond appearances, listens beneath words, and interprets what others ignore. And it is this sharpened perception, born from wounds now healed, that allowed you to navigate their trap gracefully, leaving them furious and bewildered, unable to understand how you became someone they could never fool. What unsettled them most was not that you avoided the trap, but that you did so with a calmness they did not expect. They were prepared for panic. They were prepared for confusion. They were prepared for you to react impulsively, to reveal your fears, to stumble into the chaos they had prepared. But instead, you met their strategy with a silence that shook them. You refused to grant them the spectacle they anticipated. They were waiting for your desperation, but you gave them poise. They were ready to witness your struggle, but you offered them stillness. That stillness is what frightened them, because it revealed a truth they had not considered. You were no longer someone who could be rattled. Your calmness was not accidental. It was a strength forged from years of learning that reacting gives power away. You recognized long ago that emotional outbursts feed those who want to manipulate you. Anger becomes their fuel. Fear becomes their opportunity. Confusion becomes their playground. But silence, steady, confident silence, becomes their undoing. It reminds them that you are not controlled by the circumstances they create. It shows them that your peace comes from a place they cannot touch. They designed their trap with the expectation that you would meet it anxiously. They hoped you would rush to defend yourself, to justify yourself, to explain yourself. They expected frantic movement, the type that reveals insecurity. But you moved with a deliberate slowness, a thoughtful restraint. You offered no explanation because your awareness was enough. You offered no reaction because your understanding was complete. This quiet clarity felt like an insult to them, as though you had dismissed their plans as something too small to disturb your spirit. Their frustration grew each time you remained composed. Every moment you chose stillness over panic became a reminder that they were not in control of anything, not your choices, not your emotions, not the direction of your life. They had invested themselves in creating chaos for you, but they could not provoke chaos within you. That inability shocked them more than the failure of their plan. They misread your calmness as apathy, when in truth it was mastery. This calmness is not a gift you were born with, but a strength you learned through experience. You learned that peace is not the absence of problems, it is the presence of wisdom. You learned that not every battle requires your noise. You learned that sometimes silence is the sharpest answer to manipulation. And so, when their trap appeared, you did not fight it loudly. You simply walked around it. That quiet step away echoed louder in their minds than any argument ever could. They wanted you emotionally tangled so they could point to your reaction and claim victory. They wanted your fear to justify the trap, to reinforce their illusion of superiority. But your stillness stripped them of that illusion entirely. They realized too late that the person standing in front of them was not the same person they remembered. You had grown into someone who understands the power of restraint, someone who knows that composure can be more terrifying than confrontation. Your silence exposed the weakness of their intentions. While they were hoping to provoke you into showing vulnerability, you revealed none. While they wanted you to act impulsively, you acted intentionally. This frightened them, because people who rely on schemes need your instability to succeed. Your calmness left no cracks for them to exploit, no fear to manipulate, no uncertainty to magnify. In your steadiness, their scheme found no foothold. They were bewildered by how effortlessly you maintained your composure. They could not see the years of growth behind it, the moments when you once reacted too quickly, trusted too easily, believed too openly. They did not understand that life had taught you the difference between strength and noise. Strength is quiet. Strength is patient. Strength does not reveal itself to those who seek to unsettle it. Your calmness became your shield, and the more you carried it, the more desperate they became. They tried harder to provoke you, hoping to break through that barrier of peace. But the calmness you displayed was not fragile. It was rooted in understanding. You saw their intentions, recognized their motives, and chose not to let them disturb the equilibrium you fought so hard to build. This infuriated them, because your peace made their chaos irrelevant. Your steadiness made their efforts meaningless. Your unshaken presence reminded them that their trap was powerless from the beginning. And nothing frustrates a schemer more than realizing that the person they intended to destabilize stands unmoved, stronger, wiser, and beyond the reach of their manipulation. They believed they had you cornered because they assumed you would react the way they wanted you to. But the strength they never accounted for was your refusal to participate in their manipulation. You saw the bait, understood the intention behind it, and simply chose not to bite. This choice, quiet, deliberate, and rooted in self-awareness, is what unraveled their entire plan. They depended on your emotional involvement. They relied on your need for clarity, your desire for fairness, your instinct to defend yourself. They expected you to respond on their terms. But you did something far more powerful. You denied them access to your emotions. Manipulation requires participation. It needs you to feel guilty, confused, responsible, or afraid. It needs you to engage, to question yourself, to doubt your instincts. When you withdraw from the game, the entire structure collapses. That is what happened here. The moment you decided not to respond the way they anticipated was the moment their trap lost its power. They were prepared for you to argue, to explain, to beg for understanding, to justify your actions. Instead, you gave them silence, distance, and clarity. Your refusal to play exposed their intentions in a way they could not hide from. They expected you to be tangled in their storyline, to become a character in the script they wrote without your permission. But you stepped out of their narrative completely. You recognized that the entire plan was built not on truth, but on illusion, an illusion designed to weaken you. And rather than fighting the illusion, you simply acknowledged it and walked away. That quiet decision cut deeper than any confrontation, because it revealed something they were not prepared to face. You are no longer someone who dances to the tune of emotional manipulation. Your refusal was not loud or dramatic, it was calm, and calm rejection of manipulation is far more powerful than anger. Anger keeps you tied to the trap. Calmness liberates you from it. You understood that their plan depended on your reaction, and so you gave them none. You understood that their strategy required your confusion, and so you stayed clear. You understood that they needed you to defend yourself, and so you refused to defend when no defense was necessary. This is what terrified them. They realized they had no influence over you. People who manipulate rely on emotional leverage. They count on your kindness, your empathy, your desire for peace. They believe those qualities make you easy to control, But they fail to understand that kindness is not weakness, empathy is not naivety, and peace is not passivity. You chose peace not because you were incapable of fighting, but because the battle was beneath your spirit. You chose compassion not because you trusted them, but because you trusted yourself, and you refused their manipulation not because you were afraid, but because you recognized the insult in allowing yourself to be treated as a pawn. When you walked away from their trap, you did more than protect yourself. You dismantled the illusion they used to feel powerful. They were depending on your involvement to validate their scheme. Without your participation, their manipulation suddenly felt childish, small, and transparent, even to them. Their confidence cracked, their strategy fell apart, and in its place they were left with the uncomfortable truth that your silence was stronger than their deception. What enraged them was not the failure of the trap itself. It was the realization that they never had any real control over you. They had been operating under the belief that they understood your weaknesses, your vulnerabilities, your emotional triggers, but your refusal to engage revealed that you had outgrown all the openings they once exploited. You were no longer the person they thought they could manipulate. You had become someone who values peace over argument, truth over appearance, alignment over approval. This loss of control is what stung them the most. They had woven a web designed specifically for the version of you that no longer exists. They were aiming at shadows from your past, unaware that you had stepped into a fuller, wiser, more grounded version of yourself. When you refused to participate in their plan, you didn't just avoid the trap, you proved that you had evolved beyond it. And that evolution is the very thing they cannot defeat. Your refusal became a mirror they did not want to look into. It showed them their intentions clearly. It revealed their motives plainly. It dismantled any justification they had created to mask their deception. And in that reflection they saw someone desperate for control, facing someone who no longer needed external approval to stand strong. That quiet truth, delivered by your silence, is what made them furious, because the moment you chose not to participate was the moment their entire scheme became powerless. What unsettled them most was the way your strength revealed their weakness. They created the trap believing it would expose your flaws. They thought you would panic, collapse, or reveal uncertainty. They built it as a stage where your supposed vulnerability would be put on display, but instead the spotlight turned back onto them. Their plan, meant to show your fragility, ended up unveiling the fragility of their own character. Demand. It showed their insecurity, their desperation for control, their hunger to see you diminished. They wanted the trap to define you. Instead, it defined them. There is something profoundly disarming about a person who remains steady when others hope to watch them fall apart. Your steadiness created a contrast they did not expect. They had woven a narrative in their minds in which you would stumble and they would appear powerful, but the moment you stood firm, the narrative collapsed. Suddenly their actions looked petty, their motives appeared small. Their intentions, once cloaked in pretense, became transparent. It was not you who appeared weak, it was the architects of the trap who did. People forget that the moment they attempt to harm someone else, they reveal the darker parts of themselves. Malice is not something that can be hidden forever. It leaks through in their tone, in their choices, in their unnecessary efforts to cause discomfort. You didn't need to expose them. Their own actions exposed them. And when their trap failed, they were forced to confront that exposure. Nothing reveals character more clearly than how far someone is willing to go to harm another. In their attempt to undermine you, they undermined their own dignity. Your strength stood in sharp contrast to their intentions. You didn't retaliate, you didn't spiral, you didn't crumble. You stood with quiet certainty, and that certainty illuminated everything they wanted to keep in the dark. People who rely on manipulation cannot tolerate someone who reacts with maturity. It ruins their illusion of superiority. They expect to tower over you emotionally, but when you remain composed, the height they claim to possess suddenly shrinks. Their attempts to appear powerful fall flat, because real strength does not need to be displayed aggressively. It simply exists. Your strength was not loud, it was not forceful. It did not need elaborate explanations or dramatic gestures. It came from knowing who you are, from understanding your worth, from trusting the wisdom you've gained over time. And because your strength was rooted in authenticity, it exposed the artificiality of theirs. They had built their sense of power on deception, control, and ego. You built yours on truth, clarity, and self-respect. The difference became impossible for them to ignore. When they realized that their trap could not shake you, they were forced to confront a painful truth. They had overestimated their influence and underestimated your resilience. This is what ignited their fury, not the failure of the trap, but the reflection it cast. It showed them how little power they truly had. It showed them the hollowness beneath their confidence. It revealed how much they needed you to be weak in order to feel strong. Your calmness, your silence, your refusal to bend, these things created a mirror that reflected back the smallness of their actions. They never intended for the situation to become a reflection of their own character. But that is what happens when someone tries to bring down a person who has grown beyond their reach. The contrast becomes undeniable. Your maturity made their behavior look childish. Your wisdom made their schemes look foolish. Your strength made their ambition to control you look desperate. They wanted to test your foundation, believing it would crack. Instead, the test exposed the cracks in theirs. Your unshaken presence revealed that they were the ones standing on unstable ground. Their joy depended on your suffering. Their confidence depended on your confusion. Their ego depended on your reaction. And when you removed yourself from their game, all the structures they built began to crumble. Your strength illuminated their weakness so clearly that even they could not deny it. And that realization burned within them because it dismantled the identity they tried to project. It forced them to confront the truth. The trap was never proof of your weakness. It was proof of theirs. They needed to harm you to feel powerful. You only needed to stand firm to reveal the truth. Their weakness was exposed not by your aggression, but by your composure. And nothing enrages the schemer more than being confronted by the quiet, undeniable strength of the one they tried to break. They wanted their plan to feel like a triumph, a moment where they could point to your downfall and reassure themselves of their superiority. But instead, the outcome became a silent testimony of your growth. What they constructed as a trap became the very proof that you had outgrown the version of yourself they believed they were dealing with. They expected you to walk into the snare, because that is what you might have done in the past, before you learned, before you healed, before you understood your own value. They underestimated how much you had changed, and this miscalculation is what caused their plan to collapse before their eyes. Growth is rarely loud. It doesn't announce itself with speeches or declarations. It reveals itself quietly in the choices you make, in the temptations you refuse, in the storms you no longer respond to. While they were studying your old patterns, you were building new strength. They remembered the person who once trusted too quickly, forgave too easily, and doubted themselves too deeply. But that person was shaped by experiences that did not leave you empty. They left you wiser. They left you aware. They left you with a kind of inner maturity they never expected you to carry. Your maturity turned their elaborate plan into something almost trivial. You saw the inconsistency in their words, the slight tension in their attempts to appear innocent, the urgency behind their gestures, and instead of being drawn in, you stepped back. It wasn't fear that caused you to retreat, it was understanding. You understood that not every invitation deserves acceptance. Not every smile deserves trust. Not every opportunity is genuine simply because it looks attractive. They misread this caution as hesitation, unaware that it was discernment. Discernment that came from wounds now transformed into wisdom. They believed their trap was clever because it relied on the flaws you once had. But you have grown past those flaws. You no longer give your trust to people just because they expect it. You no longer explain yourself just because someone demands clarity. You no longer chase after peace in places where peace does not exist. They built the trap based on who you used to be, unaware that you now walk with a stronger sense of self, and when they saw that you avoided the trap effortlessly, they were forced to confront that truth. Your growth became the unexpected barrier between you and their intentions. They thought their scheme was strong enough to catch you, but your awareness was stronger. They thought you would respond emotionally, but you responded rationally. They thought you would crumble inwardly, but you stood firmly. Each of these reactions was something they could not comprehend because it did not match the outdated image of you they carried in their minds. This mismatch frightened them. They realized they no longer understood you. They realized their predictions were no longer reliable. They realized they had no ability to control someone who had learned to control themselves. That is why they grew angry, not only because their plan failed, but because the failure revealed how little they truly knew about the person you had become. Growth is a quiet rebellion against manipulation. It is the moment you refuse to react the way others expect. It is the moment you choose dignity over frantic explanations. It is the moment you step into truth rather than be dragged into someone else's drama. You displayed that growth without even trying. And the contrast between your calm evolution and their desperate scheme made their actions look foolish, childish, even desperate. They thought they were testing your weakness. They did not realize they were testing your growth. They didn't understand that you had spent years learning the difference between sincerity and pretense, between loyalty and convenience, between guidance and control. Every lesson you learned built the maturity that guided you away from their trap, and when they saw that maturity in action, they felt exposed. Your growth became their downfall, because it showed that they were fighting a version of you that no longer existed. It showed that their trap was outdated, ineffective, almost laughable in the face of who you are now. And nothing stings more than being outmatched not by aggression, but by evolution, by a quiet, undeniable maturity that stands taller than any scheme designed in secret. What they cannot accept is that your inner awareness has made you untouchable. Not untouchable in the arrogant sense, but untouchable in the way a grounded soul cannot be shaken by shallow schemes. You didn't become unreachable by distancing yourself from the world. You became unreachable because you learned how to see the world differently. You learned how to read intentions long before actions reveal them. You learned how to trust the quiet truths that rise within you. You learned how to discern the difference between genuine connection and disguised manipulation. All of this awareness formed a shield around your spirit, one they never anticipated, one they could not break through. They wanted to ensnare someone who was emotionally open in the wrong ways, someone who would step into their design without question. But awareness changes the course of your decisions. It changes the way you interpret people's words. It changes the meaning you attach to their behavior. They thought they had you figured out because they remembered you from a time when you had less clarity, a time when you still believed everyone's intentions matched their expressions. But awareness evolves quietly, and by the time they attempted to deceive you, you had already ascended into a level of insight they could not measure. Awareness teaches you where to place your trust. It teaches you when to remain silent, when to walk away, and when to engage. It teaches you that not every opportunity is a blessing, and not every smile carries sincerity. With awareness, you learn to pause before stepping into situations that seemed urgent. You learn to observe before agreeing. You learn to feel the hidden energy behind someone's words long before their actions confirm it. This deepened perception is what allowed you to see the trap as something fragile, predictable, and ultimately powerless. They mistook your quietness for obliviousness, your gentleness for ignorance, your patience for vulnerability. They did not understand that inner awareness transforms these qualities into strengths. What seems like softness is actually discernment. What seems like silence is actually strategy. What seems like calmness is actually mastery. When you operate from awareness, you no longer need to announce that you see the trap. You simply walk past it with a clarity that feels almost supernatural to those who rely on deception. This is what infuriates them. They cannot comprehend how you knew. They believe you must have had outside information. They assume someone warned you. They are convinced there must have been a clue they missed, but the truth is more unsettling to them. You simply saw beyond the surface. They cannot understand the kind of sight that is born from experience, from introspection, from a soul that has learned to listen. They cannot understand how you sensed their motives without them being spoken aloud. It feels unfair to them, as though you were playing with an advantage, and in a way you were. The advantage of awareness, something they cannot imitate. Your awareness also revealed something else they were not prepared to face. You do not react from fear anymore. They expected you to panic, to doubt yourself, to question your direction, but awareness brings confidence. A quiet, unshakeable confidence that does not need validation. You do not need to prove them wrong. You do not need to expose their intentions. You do not need to engage in their drama. Awareness allowed you to remove yourself before chaos could reach you. And this calm removal, this peaceful acceptance of truth, made their entire plan collapse before it began. They wanted you trapped inside their illusion, but you had already risen above it. They wanted control over the narrative, but you were reading the situation from a higher vantage point. They wanted you tangled in confusion, but awareness gave you clarity that cut through every layer of deception. That is why they are furious, not because you outsmarted them, but because their tactics were never a match for someone who sees beyond the obvious. Awareness is a quiet kind of power. It does not boast. It does not demand recognition. It does not shout, "I knew what you were doing." It simply chooses the wiser path and leaves the schemers surprised by their own irrelevance. Your awareness has made you untouchable, not because you built walls, but because you learned how to recognize what should never be allowed near your heart. It is this wisdom, calm, steady, undeniable, that turned their trap into a mirror reflecting their own intentions back at them. And nothing provokes more fury than realizing the person they tried to break has become someone they can no longer deceive, influence, or reach. In the end, what they built to harm you became the lesson that elevated you. They crafted a trap from shadows, believing they understood the measure of your strength, unaware that you had grown far beyond the reach of their assumptions. What was meant to confine you only revealed how far you had risen. You walked away not because you feared them, but because you understood that their intentions were too small for the magnitude of your spirit. And though they burn with frustration, though their pride aches with the sting of being outmatched, Their fury is nothing compared to the quiet triumph you now carry. You do not need their apologies, their explanations, or their validation. You have something far greater. Clarity. The kind of clarity that comes from surviving storms, learning from wounds, and choosing wisdom over reaction. Let their anger fade into the background of your life. Let their disappointment remain theirs to unpack. Your path continues forward, guided by a deeper knowing, a steadier heart, and a vision strengthened by everything you refused to fall for. They planned for your downfall, but all they managed to do was witness your ascent, and as you step into the life that awaits you, calm, aware, unshaken, remember this: no trap can contain a soul that has learned to see, and no scheme can conquer someone who has outgrown the very darkness that once tried to destroy them. You are beyond their reach now, and that is why they are furious.